Good morning, everyone. Teng Boo from Capital Dynamics again. Good to see you all. Today, I'm going to talk about a topic of which I'm sure most of you are not familiar with or have not thought about it or may not even be aware that it is a topic that is of extreme and urgent importance. I'm not going to talk about Trump's tariff. I'm not going to talk about Israel attack on Iran. I'm going to talk about a topic that most of you would have not seen it coming because the issues surrounding this topic have been undiscussed, not discussed, or hidden from the views of most people, particularly people in Asia. Today I'm going to talk about Japan's military revival, whether Japan should re-militarize, whether you think Japan should have a military revival or not. Because, people love sushi, anime, and people respect the Japanese discipline. And beneath that kawaii aesthetic, however, lies a legacy of carnage, atrocities, hidden from the ordinary Japanese people and denied vehemently by the Japanese politicians. Please stay throughout and think carefully about what I'm about to share with you. Because, like George Santayana says, the philosopher says, for those who do not remember history, you're condemned to repeat it. What Japan was like before the Meiji reform of 1860s. Japan, you can see the tea ceremonies, the Buddha statues, and so on. In the earlier part of the Japanese civilization, Confucianism arrived in Japan relatively early. It arrived in Japan around the 5th century CE, spreading from China through Korea. Later on, during the Tokugawa shogunate, during the Edo period, Japan saw a flourishing of Neo-Confucianism, which was adopted in Japan as a primary teaching in Japan's political and social affair. So from about the 5th century to about the middle of the 19th century, Confucianism significantly influenced Japanese culture. It provided a framework for social order, governance, ethical behavior, impacting aspects like education, the samurai code, and the hierarchical social structure. After that, after Confucianism, the next religion, the next philosophy that significantly influenced Japan was Buddhism. In 1614, Tokugawa Ieyasu ordered every Japanese family to register at a Buddhist temple. This was to help eliminate Christianity from Japan. In essence, every Japanese during the Tokugawa Japan was a Buddhist, and every funeral was a Buddhist ceremony. So, in short, Japan, before the middle of the 19th century, was essentially Confucianism and Buddhism. Then came the establishment of the Meiji government, where Shintoism, which is something that is Japan's native form of religion, Shintoism and Buddhism separated officially in 1868 with the establishment of the Meiji government. With that, throughout Japan, up to 40,000 Buddhist temples were destroyed. That was also the beginning of state Shintoism and, as we would maybe call it now, Imperial Japan. This period where it changes Japan from a pretty peace-loving Japan to a militant, imperialistic Japan is extremely important. How did this come about? Well, once again, you have to thank America for regime change. Commodore Perry from America and his black ships sailed into what is known as the Edo Bay or the Tokyo Bay at that time, firing 73 blank rounds in a salute to American independence, and then handing over a letter of blunt demands before sailing off to Hong Kong. When Commodore Perry returned, at the time a nation without a single ocean-going battleship had no choice but to bow to the Americans. There began the Japanese period of industrialization and westernization. That was when the Japanese realized that they cannot be peace-loving Confucianists and Buddhists anymore. They have to follow the militant imperial behavior of Britain, Germany, France, America. So Japan industrialized and westernized very fast, and very successfully. With the born of Imperial Japan, Japan brutally invaded almost the whole of Asia, mainly in China. So that's a quick snapshot of these two very different periods of Japanese history: peace-loving, militant power, imperial militant power. Then Japan lost World War II. At the end of World War II, in Potsdam, the leaders of United States, China, that time was led by Chiang Kai-shek, and UK, set the terms for Japan's surrender. 2nd September, Japan surrendered unconditionally. In 1946, a bunch of Americans and American military lawyers drafted a new constitution for Japan that would renounce war and strip Japan's emperor of his military authority. The constitution, the new Japanese constitution, which became effective on 3rd May 1947, instituted a parliamentary system of government under which the emperor acted only on the advice of his ministers. But the most important part of this constitution is Article 9, which outlawed belligerency as an instrument of Japan's state policy and the maintenance of a standing Japanese army. Article 9, I mark it up for you in red so that you can read it and remember it, because it is about Japan's renunciation of war. Aspiring sincerely to an international peace based on justice and order, the Japanese people forever renounce war as a sovereign right of the nation and the threat of or use of force as a means of settling international disputes. In order to accomplish the aim of the preceding paragraph, Article 9 says land, sea, and air forces, as well as other war potential, will never be maintained by Japan. The right of belligerency of the Japanese state will not be recognized. This is Article 9 of the revised Japanese constitution. You must ask yourself, why was Article 9 imposed on Japan? Why was it inserted in Japan's constitution? If I am correct, if I am not wrong, the Japanese constitution is the only constitution that I know of that has got such an article in it. Why? This brings me to unpublicized and very little known records of Japan's Holocaust. I mentioned this book before, written by Dr. Brian Mark Rick. He's an American military historian. He researched very deeply into Japan's mass murder, sexual crimes, violence, meticulously compiling testimonies and data that shed light on the brutality and atrocities inflicted across the whole of Asia. This book details with unsparing clarity how Japanese forces implement a doctrine of total destruction, Senko Seisaku, against civilian populations. This is the book I'm referring to. If you like it, please buy it. After buying it, you might feel that you might not want to read it. Why? Because the chapters of this book is filled with titles of rape. Rape, R-A-P-E. I've shown you the table of contents. Chapter 1, 2, 3, is the usual Japanese xenophobic and so on and so forth. Chapter 4 is about the rape of Nanking. Chapter 6 is about the rape of Singapore and Malaya. Chapter 8 is about the rape of Guam. Chapter 9 is about the rape of the Philippines and Manila. Chapter 12 is about the rape of Asia and Hong Kong under Kuribayashi. Chapter 13 is almost like rape. It's about a comfort woman in Korea and Hong Kong and mainland that suffered under the Japanese rule. This is the other part, the second part of the contents. And like I said, buy it if you want to, but as I was reading it, almost every page is filled with horror. And as you read page by page, you feel your anger coming up. You feel I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to describe the feelings when I start to read page after page of the book. I have not finished reading the book. I find it very difficult to finish reading the book. As an aside, there's a book written by Iris Chang called The Rape of Nanjing. And she did extremely deep research before she wrote the book. Apparently, after she completed the book, The Rape of Nanjing, she was so depressed by whatever she found out that she actually committed suicide. These are some of the things that I found from the book which I just want to share with you. The International Military Tribunal of Japanese War Criminals in Tokyo concluded in 1948. In all, some 920 Japanese war criminals were executed, 475 received life sentences, and 2,900 over received prison sentences of various lengths. Now, what is more frightening is this. Tens of thousands of Japanese war criminals escaped punishment altogether. Many of them escaped punishment with the encouragement, with the complicity of the United States. This is the introduction from the book. The Japanese, on the other hand, did not have this problem. When given the opportunity, the vast majority participated in murder and rape and seemed to enjoy it, and rarely felt remorse from doing so. Consequently, the magnitude of these atrocities and the apparent lack of remorse from their perpetrators compelled me, the author, to write this book and to better understand why they did so. Upon learning these unsettling facts, my disgust only deepened when I discovered to this day Japan ignores the victims of its mass murders and sexual crimes, failing to acknowledge their sufferings. The absence of monuments or museums within Japan to commemorate these atrocities is in stark contrast to Germany, which has taken significant steps since 1945 to confront Germany's dark past, acknowledging the horrors Germany committed during the Nazi regime. In the end, through my extensive research, the author's research, I discovered that no historian has yet attempted to do a comprehensive overview of Japan's Holocaust, comparable to Hitler's Holocaust. Another example. I will read this for you because it is so... Let me read it. For example, the Marines and Army soldiers were horrified to discover murdered comrades with their Soviet penises in their mouths to greet the Americans. One unlucky soul who had the barbaric ritual of having his Soviet penis stuffed in his mouth actually was not dead, only unconscious. When the Japanese took down his pants, sawed off his penis and his testicles with a knife and stuffed them in his mouth. When he came around, spewing out his own organs with blood and sperm running down his face, he begged for his countrymen to kill him. I paused. I was so... Besides Nanking, Singapore, Malaya, Guam, Manila, and Hong Kong, numerous other cities and regions in Asia bore witnesses to the horrific atrocities committed by the Japanese throughout the Asian and Pacific Wars. The scale of Japan's campaigns extended far beyond these well-known names already explored, and hundreds of places experienced the brutal wrath of its military forces. I, for one, know because I'm born in Alostar. My parents are born in Alostar. My grandparents were born in Alostar. They were living through Japanese occupation during World War II. The campaigns Japan waged throughout China and elsewhere were undertaken in order to punish the Chinese and foreign people for their refusal to acknowledge the superiority and leadership of the Japanese race and to cooperate with them. According to extensive research, Japan committed the horrifying mass murder of at least 30 million people from 1927 to 1945. This is what the National Museum of the Pacific War reported that Japanese slaughtered 22 million over people. The Encyclopedia of Genocide noted that a minimum of 15 million Chinese died from bombing, starvation, and diseases that resulted from the Japanese terror campaign. China paid the highest price of any allied nations in World War II with Japan. The Japanese treated the subjected people with bestialization. Historian Martin Morgan suggests that the death toll may even exceed 40 million, considering whole cities vanished under Japanese controls and mass graves are continuously discovered. This is based on this book, Dr. Brian Rice, his estimate. China lost 20 million people, minimum, conservative. Indonesia, 4 million. Vietnam, 2 million. Bengal, 1.5, Philippines, and so on. Malay and Singapore, 200,000 people, totaling nearly 30 million, mostly civilians. The Japanese targeted Chinese for mass murder, regardless of sex or age, and simply marked them out as victims, to be dispensed with without any justification, except that they were poor, defenseless, and non-Japanese. The Chinese who suffered under the Imperial Japanese Army rule said the Japanese had a motto, Sanko Seisaku, meaning kill all, burn all, destroy all. The Japanese way. What is the Japanese way? Based on this book, right? He had a conversation with the author. Bryson, you must know something that is different from you Americans and different from the Germans, from us Japanese. And that is, if Japan asked me to serve in the army and do another rape of Nanking as a Japanese male, I would do so without question. That is the Japanese way. And all leaders who participated in the rape of Nanking were due respect and honor to be worshipped and remembered in shrines in Japan. That is shocking. This is not what the media tells you. This is not what the TV films tell you. This is not what the narrative from Japan or even from the West tell you.
Are you tired of doing investment research on stock markets? Want to spend time on your hobbies or go out with your friends instead? Introducing iCapital, where you can get independent, objective, and comprehensive investment advice on the go. Available in English and Mandarin and can be accessed via app, website, and print copy. We provide thorough, first-hand research-based findings on listed companies, economies, and stock markets, and clear perspective of how markets interact and how they influence investments, as well as provide Malaysian and global stock recommendations, stock portfolios with outstanding performance to follow. Subscribe now to iCapital for stock news. From only 49 ringgit a year, start investing like a fund manager. Subscribe now at www.icapital.biz.
Unit 731, a horror that's untold. Unit 731 was Imperial Japan's covert biological and chemical warfare division, disguised as Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department, located in Manchuria, Pingfan. It operated from 1936 to 1945 as a nightmarish human experimentation complex. At its core, at least 3,000 men, women, and children were used as live tests, or called marotas, for cruel experiments. Vivisections without anesthesia, hypothermia trials involving freezing limbs submerged in ice water, forced frostbite testing where skin upon sounded like wood. Estimates suggest that at least 200,000 people died within these experiments or due to infectious illnesses caused by the activities of Unit 731, rivaling Auschwitz in Germany during Hitler's time. The cruelty didn't end there. Victims were infected with diseases such as cholera and the plague, and then had the organs removed for examination before they died in order to study the effects of the diseases without decomposition after death. Look, let me not repeat this. Like most of Japan's atrocities, this history of Unit 731 was buried. It remained hidden. In 2024, last year, 4 American high school students from New Mexico stumbled upon this buried trove while they were preparing for National History Day, a history competition in America. When the group first encountered the story of Unit 731, they were stunned, not only by the atrocities committed, but by the fact that they had never heard of it before. To learn more, the students from Monga, Nicole Gabor, and Masara Al-Buri spent up to 10 hours a day over 3 months going through thousands of pages of archive journals, books, and other primary sources to research on Unit 731. They even had to submit requests under America's Freedom of Information Act to the US government for previously undisclosed information. One of the students, Pham, noted how the Japanese narrative has been recast after World War II through a very soft image, anime, fashion, and the carefully cultivated victimhood of Hiroshima. Pham said we get taught so much about the Holocaust and World War II in general. We hear about the Nazis, but we never hear about the Japanese. What did the Japanese do? The 4 girls said their documentary surprised many of their fellow contestants and even some of the judges who have never heard of Unit 731. This documentary also brought, as an aside, a little-known American betrayal. The Their project uncovered US complicity in covering up Unit 731 atrocities. American officials granted immunity to the Japanese scientists in exchange for their biological warfare data, ensuring many of the people involved were able to live quietly as academics, government officials, or pharmaceutical executives, including one Shiro Ishii, the founder of Unit 731, who became a professor. What Japanese history lessons don't tell you. This is according to a BBC journalist. She's a Japanese, Mariko Oyo. She says that in her school history textbook, only 19 of the 357 pages talk about events from 1931 to 1945. The rape of Nanjing was relegated to a single footnote. Comfort woman for the slack slavery only got a line again in the footnote. So what they're saying is, the Japanese textbook, the Japanese history, don't tell you all the atrocities. Former history teacher Tamaki Matsuoka, who spent years interviewing 250 Japanese soldiers who invaded Nanking, noted that most Japanese students grow up unaware of Japan's war crimes. Germany has gone to great lengths to erect monuments to honor the victims of the Third Reich domestically. Japan, in contrast, has only erected monuments to her war dead, her war criminals, and her evil leaders in Japan. Japan has not erected any monument to honor the 30 million victims of the Japanese Imperial Army. So, I come to the main topic of my talk. The main topic is not to talk about Japan's history. It's not to talk about the atrocities that Japan has committed. That's in the past. I'm interested in the future, the present and the future. I'm talking about Japan's military revival. Because Japan has always insisted that growing her military was strictly defensive in nature. And every move by the Japanese government, by the Japanese politicians towards the so-called normalization by the Japanese government has been gradual, so as not to alarm the Japanese population, which, to be fair to them, has remained largely opposed to Japan's military revival. By 1954, the National Safety Force had morphed into Japan's self-defense force, a military in everything but letterhead. Successful cabinets, Japanese cabinets, stretched Article 9 like war mochi, each reinterpretation allowing ever more hardware, military hardware. The climax arrived in July 2014 when Shinzo Abe, one of the most imperialistic, militant Japanese prime minister, conjured collective self-defense, enabling Japanese troops to fight abroad if an ally was attacked. Washington cheered, Tokyo bowed willingly. In 1945, Japan, in Article 9, promised never to rebuild her military. It is not a verbal promise, it is a written promise. In 2022, Japan announced a massive $320 billion military program and announced that her defense budget under her new national security strategy would double to 2% of Japan's GDP in 2 years' time. In September 2022, the Japanese government announced its intention to restore Japan to military greatness, beginning with its largest rearmament program since the end of World War II. As one of my colleagues said, Japan's pacifism today is about as convincing as a 10 ringgit Petaling Street Rolex. If you know what a 10 ringgit Petaling Street Rolex is. Central to Japan's integration with the US military is also a closer relationship with NATO, which is spreading its tentacles into Asia. Japan attended the NATO summit in Madrid for the first time in 2022, and in 2023 joined the unprecedentedly large 2-week air defender exercise with NATO countries in Europe as part of an ongoing joint military training program. Japan has also opened a NATO liaison office in Tokyo. Japan's massive military industrial complex with Mitsubishi Heavy Industry at its core is producing America's advanced medium-range air-to-air missile carried by F-35 stealth fighters, and is also building Patriot Advanced Capability 3 missiles for export back to America. Exporting weapons, military weapons, is prohibited in Japan until now. Japan has also converted 2 large warships into aircraft carriers, the first in Japan's Navy since 1945, both ready to carry F-35. Britain's British Aerospace, BAE, and Japan's Mitsubishi are producing the new Tempest next generation stealth fighter over the next 10 years as part of a global combat air program with Italy. All this massive investment in arms production are reviving Mitsubishi World War II role as a major weapons manufacturer. In December 2024, Japan's cabinet approved a record defense budget for 2025, the 13th consecutive year where Japan's defense budget expanded. For the financial year 2025, Japan's defense budget increased by 9.4% to a record 8.7 trillion yen. This is a very large, aggressive military spending for an island country that does not have any land adjoining neighbors. Japan is basically an island nation. Japan's FY 2025 budget marks the third year of the new defense build-up program, which I have mentioned to you outlines a massive multi-billion, hundreds of billions in defense spending spread until FY 2027. Gone are the days when the Japan Self-Defense Force operated under the pretense of self-defense. They are now carrying logistics operations in the Philippines, jointly developing missile systems with Italy and the UK, displaying real guns. Real guns are very rapid guns and warships at international arms expos. Tokyo is not only expanding its defense industrial base, but also inserting itself into the very circuits of NATO-affiliated arms production. Today, Japan fields F-35 stealth fighters, advanced Aegis destroyers from America, a defense budget that will make Article 9 blush. Pacifism for Japan is a very highly elastic concept. What was once a policy of military minimalism is rapidly morphing into militarization with global implications. And Japan is not disguising it. It's just that maybe you have not paid attention. Just a few days ago, on 11 June 2025, China rightfully pointed out Japan is violating its pacifist constitution by conducting live fire tests of long-range anti-ship and hypersonic missiles. Pay attention to what Japan is doing with her military. Because this reinterpretation of Article 9 since 2014 have turned the Japanese constitution into a living paradox. A war-renouncing country with stealth fighters, ballistic missile interceptors, and a rapidly evolving doctrine of it's not collective defense anymore, it's collective aggression. Japan insists she's still pacifist, but Japanese missiles do not bow. To clear the way for Japan's rising power, Japan is not only tearing up her pacifist constitution, but also the main World War II peace treaty it signed, the Potsdam Proclamation of 1945, which stated that all foreign territories and islands occupied by Japan, including Taiwan, would be restored to their former owners, in particular China and Russia. Under this Potsdam Proclamation, Japan's current claims to the Diaoyu Islands in East China Sea and to Russia's Kura Island have no basis in international law and are clearly acts of expansionist aggression. So you think of Japan as anime, sushi? I think of Japan of the Holocaust. Stop Japan before it is too late. Because there's this very subtle, very sophisticated approach committed by Japan and, of course, supported by America to revive Japan's militarism. Now, what is worrying is this: a nation that does not deal with bestialities and crimes is a nation still capable of committing them again and again. The past is not only a distant past with fading memories. I firmly believe that allowing Japan to rearm, to encourage Japan to revive her brutal militarism, will commit the entire Asia, including Malaysia, to suffer endless horrors in the hands of Japan again. I'm convinced, very convinced, that Japan will never remain permanently satisfied with her subordinate status. I strongly believe that a more capable Japan will be a dangerous country. Japan's military revival must be stopped. Knowing her post-Meiji reform history, Japan cannot and should not remilitarize. I hope you hear me clearly. You can do your own research yourself. Think clearly. The next time when you visit whichever part of Japan, don't just be swayed, don't just be taken in by this very superficial niceties that you see. Because underlying these niceties is a Japanese government. The Japanese country has been ruled by the Liberal Democratic Party since the end of World War II, except for a very short period. That very short period where LDP was not ruling, that government was pressurized and in a way overthrown by the US government, because that non-aggressive Japanese government wanted to make sure that Japan doesn't become militant again. So take that out period under Hatoyama, Japan has been always under LDP. Shinzo Abe's grandfather was a former Prime Minister of Japan, one of the worst Prime Ministers of Japan. Worst from an Asian point of view, because he was corrupted by the United States to do a lot of things that we have to live with in terms of the consequences. So, like I said, for all our talks, we do our research. I don't only read this book, I read a lot of other things as well. And then help to share this video, because a strong militarily advanced Japan with United States behind her is a dangerous development for all of us in Asia. If you remember the horrible barbaric act under the Bataan Death March, where the soldiers' private parts were, I'm not sure how to describe it. I don't want to see that ever happen again. I'm getting to be 70 plus, so possibly maybe it will never happen in my lifetime. But what about your children's lifetime? What about your children's children? Will they have to go through horrors that we could have prevented now? So like I said, the next time when you visit Japan, please reflect. Please have a bit of circumspection and help stop Japan's military revival. Share our video, like our video, and more importantly, subscribe to our Capital Dynamics YouTube channel. As you will know by now, this YouTube channel is pretty different from other YouTube videos. I hope you have a good weekend and have a productive week ahead, and hopefully Israel's invasion attack on Iran does not lead to something that is horrific in the Middle East. Bye-bye.